Okay, it's just uploading. And we are live. Okay, so happy Monday, everybody. Welcome to episode 37 of Change School TV, our weekly dose of inspiration for your Monday mindset and mojo reset for the week ahead. Now, tonight we have a great story of change from one of our longest standing humans of change, Matt Rickard. And Matt's been a long supporter of the Change School as one of our change amplifiers, also as a reflective guide at one of our past Change Ventures retreats in Bali. And he has finally agreed to come on to the show to share his awesome career journey and best tips and tricks for making it all happen. So Matt, I'm so excited to have you finally after years and years of hounding you. But we've changed format so many times, and I think this is probably the best one for us to just have a chat as we do. Only this time we are live on Facebook.
Cool. Nice to see you. And chat.
Nice to see you. I'm so looking forward. And you've got your cuppa, and I wish I had one.
England in the World Cup, so hopefully a big week for England. We'll see. It's been many years, I think.
Fingers crossed. I know. It's insane. So I'm super excited for tonight's topic. I know we've got a lot of ground to cover. You have been on such an amazing journey, and I can't wait for the folks who are joining us live tonight or catching the replay in a few days to hear it all. And I really love the topic that you actually suggested, which is all around being selfish and really reflecting on what you lose when you follow your heart's desires. I really loved it. It resonates so much with me. So before we dive in, I'm just going to do a brief intro to you. So for those of you who are joining us, happy Monday again. And we have Matt Rickard on the show tonight. And a little bit about Matt. He's originally from the UK, a filmmaker, and currently living in Thailand. And the majority of his corporate career was spent working in the tech sector for software startups in various business development and management roles in Australia as well as in Singapore. And he's also very active he's also a very active social entrepreneur, having designed and launched a number of programs in Southeast Asia. Writing, acting, and film production has always been a sideline passion for Matt, mostly expressed through the development of short story projects, until in 2014 he decided to dedicate professional time in this area. He's since written and produced a documentary called The Forest Way and is currently working on the production of Crazy Dark Moon. So, Matt, I'm so excited for you to unveil the bits and bobs of everything that you're working on. And as always, I've got a few questions just to guide our conversation. So maybe to kick us off, you could start by telling us what you're working on right now, what projects you've got in the pipeline.
Okay, before I jump into it, let me just, I'm in Chiang Mai. There was a power cut like an hour ago, but we're cool. There's like loads of storms, but we're cool. But I just say it now in case this like Facebook Live thing just goes out halfway through. And
nice
secondly,
disclaimer. Cool.
I have two dogs that are really happy I'm doing this because otherwise they'd be moaning outside, but I've invited them into the house. They're like sitting under the table.
Cuties.
So yeah, just if there's dog barking, that's also part of the neighborhood. So yeah.
Well, that's okay. If they're barking, you can tell them to come say hi.
So yeah, I'm working on a few things. I mean, I've kind of been working on one thing for a few years and a bunch of other things to survive, I suppose. My career kind of changed probably 4 or 5 years ago, although it was a long process going from corporate world to a bunch of other things. And, following my passion of writing, which had just been really a hobby for many years, and filmmaking as well. And right now I've been, working on a screenplay for 3.5 years. Which when I embarked on it, I didn't really realize quite how long it takes to take a screenplay from an idea to the screen. And that's kind of evolved into, what was a screenplay to being involved with a bunch of other people in the industry in Thailand who have their own projects, who have a lot more industry knowledge than me, a lot more expertise, and with a couple of them forming a company. We're not registered as a business yet, but a company called Crazy Dark Moon, which is what it'll be, and we're going through a process of raising seed money to fund that business for the next couple of years, and the funding of that business will ultimately see us get a number of projects from idea to screen, which one of them being a movie that I've been working on for 3.5 years called Dark Karma. So, that's really a lot of what I'm doing, but actually it's not paid. It's my passion, and it's a startup. It's funded by myself and my own kind of money and time. And then, to support my time around that, I write for YouTube, like an informational channel, doing kind of scripts on everything from, the 10 best tanks in the world to, the biggest presidents ever, to the world's most powerful people, to, what does giving up smoking do? So that's pretty interesting.
Awesome.
But so I kind of have a couple of things, so things that I'm doing to kind of fund my time, but really the real focus is getting this production company, from concept, which it is now, to funded operation and running, which will be, probably based out of Chiang Mai in Thailand once that happens. So and that's Crazy Dark Moon.
Amazing. That's super, super exciting. And it's so interesting actually to hear you talk about it. And, obviously it resonates, and I'm sure with many folks who are watching now who are entrepreneurs or are running a startup. I think sometimes, at least for me, if I think about film production, I romanticize and imagine that the process is totally different. But when you talk about working on something for 3 years and then going out to funding and, and having to have a side hustle or things that support you financially, right? So that you can pursue your passion. I mean, it sounds the same, but different.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
When I first went into it, I actually had no idea what I was doing. And I didn't go back to school fully, but I did go back and do some training to learn to write properly, because I ambitiously took on, writing a screenplay without really understanding how to write a screenplay. Although I'd done a lot of writing in my career, and had written a kind of kid's story as well, and I'd done a few small things, but I really entered it with completely no knowledge. And that it was 2013 really, so it was actually 5 years ago when I first started, but that was with zero knowledge. And originally it was writing a screenplay with an idea out of Singapore. I lived in Singapore till 2014, so right. And then when I moved to Thailand and spent more time here, that kind of influenced the process of writing, and the idea changed. I went back to school. I learned properly the structure of screenwriting. I kind of invested in time with a much more accomplished screenwriter who knew the kind of academic side of it. It's definitely been a long process.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And it just goes to show, right? I mean, no matter how excited and how passion driven we are by things, nothing happens overnight, right? We have to invest the time and effort to getting it off the ground.
Well, actually, I think when I started, I was like, this will take a year. I was like, I'm going to write this story. And actually, a lot of writers do that. I think a lot of people who write screenplays will, and this is really why I had no intention of writing a screenplay and sending it to a producer or sending it to Hollywood. And, I read too many horror stories, and, the statistics are just, I don't know exactly what they are, but they're frighteningly crap, frankly. You can be the best writer in the world and have the best idea and have the most perfect screenplay and send it off to Hollywood or post it on the blacklist, which is now where a lot of, Hollywood producers go and get their content from. So there's a website called the Blacklist where you can post your idea, your screenplay. But
cool.
I came into it, as half a writer, but half a guy. I had a career in sales, which helped me no end. I wouldn't say I'm nearly the best writer in the world. I've got a lot to learn, but I think if you can, have an element of self-selling to the process, then makes it way easier. And it's enabled me to take what was an okay idea and turn it into a group idea, and get some partial funding and create a pilot, and then shift out of worrying about it being perfect and instead start to move all the other pieces. The amount of pieces in making a film, which I've learned now through ultimately my own funding of the process and some other people that came in and helped. But it's a hugely collaborative process that involves, you know, technical on-site people. I mean, camera people, director of photography, directors, producers, you know, writers, editors. I mean, it's, you know, and that's just before you've even got your product, right? And so the difference between just writing a screenplay and going, oh, I hope it gets made, to, you know, I never wanted to do that. I mean, that kind of was always going to be, if I do this, you know, I want to make sure it becomes real. So I wanted to create the business that does that, whether that meant, you know, a business around one movie, which was originally the idea, to the business around, you know, creating this content and a bunch of other projects and seeing them come to life. So it's, yeah, I don't remember what the question was. Maybe it wasn't.
Story of evolution. No, I mean, I'm just sorry. I'm just letting you go because it's so interesting.
Well, the process, yeah, I mean, it's, oh man, the process is so long. It's, like I say, it's been 5 years, but even, I mean, we've known each other quite a while now. You know, I've gone through these massive peaks and troughs with this where, I thought it was going to happen like 2 years ago. And there's been so many times where I'm like, fuck, I'm going to give up now. You know, it's like, and then I just go, you know what, I'm going to just close this for a month, go and like hide in the sand. And then, but when you really want to do something, then you just get back to it. And you're like, okay, well, what's the way to rework this? What just went wrong? What did I do too early? What didn't I do? You know, how do I now reposition and go again? You know, I'm at a stage now where I'm kind of telling myself, okay, we're at this real kind of turning point of things are about to really happen, or I'm going to put it down again. But I know that's not really the reality. Things might happen, or I'll find another way to make it happen. I'll just
exactly. Yeah. Well,
and that's what happens when you find what you really want to do, because you don't kind of get bored on it. You know, you get disheartened occasionally, and you get setbacks, and you run out of money, but ultimately, if you really want to do it, you just get back to it and carry on and just persevere.
It's so true. You figure out what you need, whether it's a break, whether it's time out, right? And eventually, like a magnet, it just comes back to, and you go back to it, right? Yeah. So awesome stuff you're working on right now. And, you know, I think something everyone can resonate with is those peaks and troughs, right? I mean, in everything that we do. But you've actually been on a journey of several pivots, right? And shifts, I guess, in your career. So maybe you could share a little bit about your pre-filmmaking universe and what that looked like.
I mean, I won't go into a whole CV of it, but like my career was in the tech world for, actually, you know, when I left school at 16, I'd worked in a recording studio for a year. It's quite important to me. I think about this quite a lot because I realized I was doing the job I loved then, right? I left school. I was on a YTS course in England, which is a youth training scheme, getting paid 27 quid a week, which is like, that's not enough for like 2 pints of beer in Singapore now. But, you know, I did that for a year, and then I kind of just went off, meandered on a completely different path, went traveling, got to Australia, and I just wanted to earn money. I was like pretty, you know, I didn't really care. I just wanted to earn money. And I went into the kind of tech comms, the telecommunications world, which became the tech world. And, you know, most of my career was working for software startups in Sydney for some time. And then naturally your career goes from Sydney to Singapore because of the kind of APAC roles. And I had a brilliant time. I got some really good mates still there. I mean, we had an awesome time, but I didn't ever really enjoy my 9-to-5 experience. I was like, the only thing that was there was, okay, you know, by the end of the month, I'm going to hit this sales target. I'm going to make this much money. I can do this with it. I can get a holiday of 2 weeks. You know, and I was constantly disheartened by that process. I'm like, there's got to be more to life than just living that. I mean, you know, and I haven't got kids, right? And so that helps, I think, because it's not so easy for people to have the luxury that I've had just to kind of walk away from it, which I tried a number of times. I mean, I think 2009, I left NetSuite. So I was in Singapore for 8 years, running a sales team in Singapore and Hong Kong. Left in 2009, had a sabbatical because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. But again, then I was doing kind of like short movies with my camera in my spare time. And I got some funding through an organization in Singapore. I went off and made a documentary about forest monks in Thailand. And, you know, and I had no idea what I was doing. I had the camera, the boom, everything, you know, I had the smallest budget. And then I tried to go back to work afterwards about 9 months later. And I just realized I had so much fun doing that. And so that would have been 2010, 10 or something, but then it still took me 4 years. It wasn't like, I kept jumping. I went through 3 consulting jobs, and I kept trying to go back to this. Okay, I knew I really enjoyed this process of making a documentary and piecing that all together, and the creative, collaborative nature of it. Actually, that was the exciting bit. Having a vision, having an idea, and then pulling all these parts together to turn it into
life, yeah.
a product that you are really proud of and that other people enjoy. But I just couldn't work out how to do it. So, and I kept thinking, oh, you know what, I'll do it as a spare time thing, go back to work. And it wasn't until I think my last corporate job was working for a carbon management or energy management platform, which I thought was going to feel like I'm saving the world. And it just felt like I'm still trying to make some guy hit the top of the stock exchange and be $100 million guy. So yeah, that kind of was the point where I'm like, I can't go back anymore. That is it. That was 2013, I think. And at that parallel time, when I came out of that job, I went to a screenwriting course. So that was, it was, I think sometimes people think, oh, it's really easy just to kind of leave. And it's not like I'm talking to you as like, I'm now at the, pinnacle. I run a big production company. I've made all these films. But I think the difference in my sense now personally is I just can't go back now. I got to that point a few years ago, and that was the difference. Having bounced in and out, the fear has subsided now, because it was always a bit of like fear of, can I really do this? I mean, the money worry is always the thing that holds you back. It's always like, how am I going to do this? Can I really afford it? And that, I think, kept me, that's probably held me back 3 years, really, from 3 or 4 years of where I should have been. Because if I'd have just, as soon as I really broke free, I ended up with enough kind of sideline work to keep me going anyway. And that's evolved from what was originally work in my own industry to now, which I'm really happy about now, getting writing work, offshore writing work, stuff that, isn't nowhere near as paid, but I love doing it. And that's the point. And that allows me to keep following now this dream of, creating and funding and completing the company part. So, yeah.
Yeah. And, on that, I'm going to throw in a question here. I think you kind of answered it already, but you mentioned, the importance of, or in your case, having that maybe more natural ability to kind of sell yourself in a sense. Do you think that's partly what enabled you to make so many shifts multiple times? Because, you mentioned some very common concerns that people have and fears that people have, right? The financials and am I good enough? But what do you think really enabled you to make those shifts?
I don't think the selling thing, when I look at the selling part, I think that's a massive benefit of being in this industry as a creative like that.
Yeah.
Most of my mates now that I hang around with are writers, and they're much better writers than me. But the ability that I have to then, and I'm working with them to help them because it's a really good matchup. But that for me is the massive benefit of having had a career in sales, because, people who spend their whole life being creative and writers, my mates spend freaking 60 hours a week on their own, it's very insular life. And I don't do that. And even when I wrote my screenplay, I love collaborating, brainstorming with other writers. And they're always, the other writers I work with, they're always a bit like, oh, I'm not sure. But so, yeah, I think having a salesy element to my character and my career has been really useful in terms of going into this industry and being able to, work on a creative writing project and take it into the, into the funding zone. In terms of, that doesn't really answer what you asked, but in terms of, has it helped me? I don't know. I think probably just leaving school at 16 and going straight to work and living on my own, that probably has made a difference. So, yeah, I think and then I traveled, left England at 23, backpacked. I think since a young age, I've done a lot of different jobs. I've had to kind of fend for myself. I think that's probably made a difference. So I've never really thought about it, to be honest, but yeah. So maybe.
Yeah. No, it's super interesting. No, I think everyone's got their own, natural, I guess, whatever, abilities and traits and things that kind of work for them. I think for me, whenever I share my story of changing careers, for me, it's always been about really nurturing and cultivating like meaningful relationships with people, right? I'm not a big networker per se, but I'm really good at, connecting with people one-to-one, and also just kind of transporting and transferring skills that I've taken from past experiences, professional or personal, and then implanting them into the next thing. So it's always just interesting to hear what different people think have helped them.
Yeah.
But okay, so then tell me this, and I know, we've been friends for years, so I've had the pleasure of hearing the good, the bad, and the ugly, but if you could maybe share like one or two really challenging moments or times where you really like faced a barrier along this path, any phase of the path, and how you managed to overcome it.
There's so many.
I was like, just this one or two. I'm like, this is going to throw him.
To be honest, there is, if I go back, to be honest, when I look back at them, they weren't okay, firstly, the first barrier probably wasn't a barrier. I created it because I was doing the wrong thing, but that's just what you learn when you're doing it. I got to a point where, I had this product, which was a screenplay that was in development, and then I needed to shift into, I'm going to now sell this. And I decided, it may not have been the best thing at the time, but it's what I did. And I don't regret what I did, but I decided to make a pilot being like a trailer without a movie. I've been told by so many people that was the wrong thing to do, and it maybe was. And I'd have been better spending money on, people who could help me go out to sales agents. But it is what it is. And the barrier to that was money. The barrier, is so often money. Like when you are trying to do this stuff, unless you happen to be fortunate enough to, I didn't do badly in my career, but I certainly, after a few years of living very, frugally, I just didn't have the money to suddenly do this. So that was a barrier. And I tried all sorts of, I approached friends. I had no real business model. It's like, when you're asking for, this was way before, we're now at a point of asking for a lot of seed money, but it's seed money that comes with a very good business plan and a very good, reward. Whereas at that point, it was basically like, someone give you some money because I need, my dream investing in, and people go through this, right? In all industries. And that barrier was really hard to get through. Because, firstly, just, you don't want to go and ask mates, and, it's kind of hard, but that's actually who you have to go and ask, because you can't go and knock on, who do you ask? So, and I struggled with that for, it's just the way that things happen. I struggled with it for about 4 months, and then typically I'm sitting with a mate having a drink, going, it's so difficult. He went, do you want 20 grand? And I was like, what? What do you mean? So I'm sitting there kind of moaning over a drink, and then he just gives me a check, and I'm like,
my God.
It's like, and without any kind of, moments like that are just amazing, because you're like, I'm like fighting in this direction, because you can't plan that.
Yeah, I was just going to say, yeah.
Maybe because the problem is when you're going to ask for things, that people are analysing, where you're at, what you're saying, whether you're selling, all this stuff. Whereas suddenly I'm kind of broken at the point of, I can't do this anymore. And someone's, someone, for them, it's like, they know how to fix the problem. It's like, you can't plan those moments, right? So
totally.
That was a barrier that I can't give anyone advice how to overcome, because it just was by complete luck. It probably wasn't luck, is probably the wrong word, right? But I think, again, it probably just comes to the fact I just probably look like I'm just not going to give up.
Yeah.
So therefore, someone is going to help at the right time when help's needed. So
absolutely.
At that point, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I should say, because it's important. I put a lot of my own money into this, right? And more than anyone else has. And I think that's really important, because not that everyone has to do that, but for me, certainly. The amount you value something, when you've put your own money in, and that money I've put in is a substantial percentage of what I have, in the world. So it's like, that really helps you. And I wouldn't have done it if I have any doubt in it. And that really helps you to value the project hugely, not just your own effort, but, I didn't hesitate at all. It's like, I'm so willing to, but I got to the point where I couldn't, it was like, okay, this is now ridiculous if I carry on. And then that person kind of helped me. So yeah, that was one barrier. I don't know, the other ones, what was the other? I think just the barrier of this isn't really a barrier, but I think just this kind of like when you just want to give up because it's just not happening, right? But then you have to just realize it's not necessarily the goal. The end goal clearly with what I'm doing is at certain points in time, there'll be something that goes on screen and we'll all be able to say cheers and appreciate everyone's efforts. But, you know, at the same time, that takes so long, and there's all these pieces that there are just times when it just gets really difficult. Those aren't barriers, but they're just really hard, difficult times where you're like, this is freaking shit hard work, and you know, no one's paying me for it, and I might love it, but today I don't. And you know, when I had a job that I didn't like, when someone's paying me a good paycheck, I could kind of get through that day because I could go and spend that paycheck on something. So it's like kind of worked, but it's not like that. When you have a bad day doing something, and I've made myself one promise. I was like, if this stops being enjoyable, I will just give it up. And I'm kind of 4 years in, and it, you know, it hasn't stopped being enjoyable. So yeah. So that's...
I love that. No, I love that. And I mean, I'm just listening to you and I can't even add anything because I'm like, you are speaking exactly what I'm thinking and things that I've gone through. And we've talked about it so many times before, right? So, so I guess, and I know this is going to be another one. You're probably going to struggle to choose a couple, but looking back on, you know, all the experiences you've had, the ups and downs, what are some really resonant, strong sort of, I guess, life lessons or career lessons that you would share with our viewers? Just bearing in mind, you know, a lot of them are either probably in a transition right now, or, you know, what we're hearing more and more of is people who are unhappy in their jobs and have been for quite some time, but just can't really make that first step to do something different, or just feel totally unsure of what to do. And I guess, you know, one of the biggest, most common barriers we always hear about is like fear, right? Fear that I'm not good enough, fear that I can't do it, fear that I have to give up my paycheck, fear that I'll disappoint others. So what's been really, what are some lessons that have been really valuable for you?
There are two actually that come to mind when you speak. And the first one is, I've kind of dabbled with this in my head, but there's this misconception, I think, that when you're trying to do something you want to do, it should be the only thing you do. There's this kind of, you know, and I think you hear people say that, and that might be successful for some people, right? You hear these really successful people in their field of work, you know, and I'm not necessarily doing this actually to be top of the game of, you know, production companies. I'm doing it because I like doing it. It'd be nice to make some movies I'm proud of and get content out there that, you know, does well and enables me to make more. But I think there is a misconception that, you know, when you decide and that's what your heart wants to do, you must only focus on that, blah, blah, blah. For me, that was never the rule. And it didn't, you know, I didn't need to. I was able to balance doing this against having some, you know, extra work that I do to enable me to fund that side. And that, again, it's very individual. It might not be the same for everyone. But for me, I couldn't afford just to jump from, you know, corporate career to following this journey. So I had to kind of balance doing contract work, and I enjoyed that. Like, I've done a bunch of different things, as you know. I'm not going to go into all it. Like, my career in the last 4 years has been bizarre, but like, it's been really fun. I've done all sorts of kind of, you know, things here and there to earn money that have all kind of linked with my professional career while I've been cultivating this in parallel. And I think that kind of links back to your question on fear. I mean, the biggest fear is always, you know, what if it doesn't work? And frankly, if it doesn't work, well, you've learned a load more stuff anyway, so that's not even a fear. But, you know, what if it doesn't work and I don't have money? Well, you can do something else in parallel. You can contracting. If you're in, even if you, I don't know, I did have a relatively long career, so in tech, so contracting, it wasn't too difficult to pick up. But that, and it made the contracting interesting, because if I was doing, you know, last year for 18 months, I had a 2-day-a-week contract with an Australian company in the tech space and they knew exactly what I was up to. And I did it, you know, I did them a good rate because they allowed me the freedom to do what I needed to do. So I don't think, you know, the first thing is you don't need to just necessarily go from, you know, your 9 to 5, 50-hour-a-week corporate job and just ditch it all in and follow your career without any vocational kind of influence or training or, you know, understanding the new direction, because there's going to be so much to learn. So yeah, that was the first thing. I think the other thing, I don't know if this is a career thing, but for me, the thing that the biggest lesson for me is the people you end up kind of, your circle that you create, and, you know, to make you keep going forward. Like, I mean, there's two things really. There's the circle you work with, but there's also the people that influence you who are friends. And like, you gotta, some people can be really negative, and this is not that this is often their fear actually, because there might not be even people, you know, outside the industry, but getting, you know, not bowing to negativity is really important, because you kind of have to be completely unrealistic at certain stages of going into something new, because you don't really know what to expect. And if you start worrying about what might happen when you don't even know half of the industry or half of what's needed. So yeah, I mean, sticking with the right people, both the influencers, friends, people who are supporting you, like you've been one of them. I mean, I've got a bunch of people who are just, you know, I love to bits, man. They've just so supported me. And that support is just purely being encouragement when things have been difficult, right? But then also the people that I've then, you know, become thankfully able to work with, who have the same kind of mission and you know, have the same struggles and want the same benefits. So yeah, that's probably a life lesson, I suppose. So those are probably two things, I think.
Yeah, no, I love those. And
I mean, probably the same for you, right? I think, as I know.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, I think if I were to have to come up with two off the top of my head, well, I love your first one. I totally agree. You know, not having to do just one thing. And also just, you know, I guess an extension of that is finding a way to make things work, right? Yeah. And having to get creative about that and understand that you're always giving up something so that you can gain something else. And that gain is something that's, you know, a value kind of measure, right? The things that you value the most, you have to maybe give other things up in order to have. And the second one, which I always preach about and harp on about, is absolutely who do you surround yourself with, right? Yeah. And whether that's in your personal life or your professional life. And, you know, in my case these days, it's like I've wanted to kind of move further or grow further in a spiritual journey. And so I'm surrounding myself by new types of friends as well, and, you know, forming new connections around that. And I'm always one to kind of connect with people who are knowledgeable in areas that I want to learn more about or grow into. So I totally agree. Okay, so one thing I think I want to bring this back to kind of, I don't know, consolidate a lot of what we've talked about is, you know, the whole bigger, I guess, umbrella theme and topic for tonight around selfishness, right? And you know, what is it that we actually have to give up, or how do we think about selfishness when we pursue our heart's desires?
It's really, I should have thought about this question. I haven't, especially as I came up with the title.
That's okay. I know you're going to.
It's cool. Like, let me just be, I don't know, I'll be kind of spontaneous with it, but it's hard to be specific, because I think it's more just because it's just so many different things, right? I think what it is it's little things, right? I mean, just when you decide you're going to do one thing, then you cannot give to other areas of your life, like certain friends. I think I just kind of said it then, actually. Yeah, I mean, there's certain friendships that and one of the biggest things in my life has been friends all throughout my whole life, right? So being selfish to certain situations because I've got to basically pursue this because I want to, you know, has meant I've got to give up certain social situations, certain family things, actually a little bit, holidays. I mean, my family, you know, it's just stuff. When I was in earning a decent corporate salary, you know, I'd be like, okay, I can do this then, I can do this then, you know, whereas for the past couple of years, especially, I've had to say no to certain things, to my, it's a bit personal, but to my sister, you know, just visiting family at certain times, but they understand totally, but it's kind of also not nice. But I realize, you know, the longer I just kind of try and be the person that can, you know, take any time and do anything and just flash money on flights, and, you know, the longer it takes to get to the goal, really. So yeah, there's that aspect, but there's more to it than that, I think. I mean, it's kind of, I think it's also an internal thing, right? Being selfish to yourself, to your own needs a little bit, you know, having to kind of, I mean, there's, you know, just having to make sacrifices to all sorts of areas of your own life, you know, just because, I mean, I think that's partly about just being focused and dedicated on one thing. You know, you've got to end up being selfish in ways, in the things you want to do week in, week out. Otherwise you're basically going to be, like I've always had lots of ideas throughout my life. Most of those ideas were down the pub when I was drinking. Do you know what I mean? And it's amazing how many ideas you hear down the pub drinking, and then you go down the pub the next day, especially in Australia and England where the drinking culture's there, and the same ideas are being thrown around. And it was like I got to a point ages ago, I was like, okay, if I'm down the pub every day, just having those conversations. So that was like, I had to be selfish to my own desire of wanting to just go and have a drink and have a laugh and let steam off. And, I still go for a drink and have a laugh. I'm not saying I don't do that, but it's just, you have to draw a line in the sand with certain things. Otherwise, you just simply don't go forward and you don't freaking get shit done,
No, exactly.
That's probably what it means. I don't remember. When did I send you the title? I don't remember.
I think it was like a month ago, so I don't blame you for.
Yeah, I don't remember what I was thinking at the time, but it would have been that. It's.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. And I mean, as you know, from our own conversations, right, it's something I've been working on myself as well. And I think there's so many, selfish means what it means, but I think, how we practice being selfish is what can be so different from person to person. And for me right now, it's a lot around creating more space and time just to be. I think I've spent the last few years doing in like super mode. And so now it's, still obviously, life goes on, work goes on, all of that good stuff continues, but it's also within that finding new ways to create more room for self-care, for just relaxing, for not thinking, not stressing. I'm slower to respond to people on WhatsApp. It's small things, right?
The irony of that is it's actually being really generous to yourself, but it's like we talk about being selfish. I mean, that's the freaking ridiculous thing. But yeah.
Well, exactly. I mean, the whole word of selfishness and the whole idea has just become vulgar when in fact, it's so important for us to grow, like you said, right? And to sustain ourselves and to thrive. Yeah.
I wish I had a more specific example. I'm sure I have, and I'll remember it after the call. But there's been
no worries.
It's more a behavioural thing, and it's just everything, and and relationships with other people, and how you decide to spend your time, being consciously chosen because it's going to help you go in the right direction, right? So
exactly,
because you want to do that. So
yep, exactly. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Matt. Just a couple of things I just want to throw out before we wrap up. I know you have, through your journey, obviously followed tons of different, resources. You're a big self-learner, books you've read, tools, inspirational quotes. So out of everything you've come across, is there a book, is there a resource, anyone you follow, or any, words of wisdom that you would recommend to anybody who's watching now, or just ones that have been good for you?
I mean, I'm not going to recommend because I don't even know if it's connected. I'll tell you, but
go for it.
Because there are certain things that keep me freaking motivated every week, but I don't know if it's relevant. But, I think less and less, especially in the last 18 months, I think you and I have had this conversation personally a few times, but, I less and less will watch mainstream media. I think probably since the US election, just because, not because I have any issue with who's in power. I don't really, I don't spend too much time thinking about politics, but I think the media just became very difficult and consuming and quite negative and actually just so hard to know what's right or what's wrong. And I got to a point where I spend, pretty much every day when I absorb content, I listen to podcasts. I listen to mostly a combination of, Joe Rogan, the Joe Rogan Experience podcast, Sam Harris and Tim Ferriss, who, I listen to their podcasts. They're hugely inspirational. They'll have writers on there, but they'll have people from all walks of life, comedians, intellectuals, scientists, astronomers, everything. And you learn actually about what's going on in the world through listening to these podcasts. I learn a lot about not what's going on with the world, but just also, my own struggles and where I'm working with and, what I need to do next. So I listen to those podcasts. I try and listen to one a day. I mean, I do that normally when I'm exercising and, walking or whatever, but they've been hugely useful just to keep me like buoyant and motivated and inspired. Because these guys, there seems to be a kind of club of these guys. I don't know, like they all know each other and they're all, they're not really vetted politically in the way that they're not one way or the other. So you're not getting any kind of political bias in their voice. Mostly, right. Mostly it's a kind of documentary style interview. Rarely do they try and bring their own opinion in too much. So you end up with an unbiased view from people in the world who are really making a difference in different fields. So you know, that's been massively useful. So I don't read enough books, which is really bad to say.
I stopped as well. I've been trying so hard the last 2 years, and I think
I have
I've
Jocko Willick's book here.
2 books in 2 years.
You know, I've got Jocko Willick's book here, which I'm reading about. Discipline is Freedom, which you know, that's a cool book. I mean, it's kind of like a coffee table book, which I wasn't expecting. But
Discipline is Freedom. That's interesting.
He's freaking. I mean, he's cool as well. He's an ex Navy SEAL who also has a podcast, but I mean, he comes from another kind of realm, but he talks a lot about, again, when I was, you know, listening to him and then reading his words, really useful when I'm like really kind of hitting a wall, because he's just kind of, okay, that's when you really press on, because then you're like, okay.
Right.
He talks about it from, you know, the physical aspect of being a Navy SEAL, but really he's using a metaphor for wherever you're at, and the benefit of, you know, taking that and using it as a lesson to just push on through, you know, what's next. So yeah.
Oh,
stuff.
cool.
I have a quote, but I can't even remember it, but it's funny, I look at it every day, which is a Socrates quote, but it is, I'm paraphrasing it, it's just about, you know, understanding the length of the journey. I'll send it or I'll post it afterwards.
Yeah, please do.
It's about, you know, you know, not getting too excited when you have kind of small wins, and just knowing that there's a long way to go, and blah blah blah. I'm totally paraphrasing it, but apart from that, yeah, there's no. I mean, I think I haven't really read any industry specific books that have necessarily motivated me, because you know, I did training around my writing, and all of the stuff motivation wise for me that I've needed is more of the emotional side of this process, because that's really what. It never, skills training never hinders you. You can always go and get that. But, you know, the emotional drawback of being let down and knowing it's going to take longer and you need more cash. I mean, that's the shit that you got to work out how to circumvent or push through.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, no, I love it. Well, thank you for sharing these. I've written them down, so I'm going to post them in the messages, and I'll have a look at the Socrates quote as well, see if I can find it.
Cool.
Awesome. Okay. Well, is there anything, I mean, we covered so much. Thank you so much for spending your movie night with me. Is there anything you wanted to add, or anything I missed, or anything at all?
Not that comes to mind, no.
Okay. All right. And are you happy for anyone watching to kind of stay in touch with you? And if so, yeah.
I mean, do people give their email out? I don't care. I'm happy to give my email. I'm not really like a big...
Up to you, whatever you're comfortable with. You can also
I give my email, because I'm on Twitter, but I'm not like a freaking tweeting person in the slightest. It's like
I know you're not.
I've got like 10 followers, and I've been on there like 5 times in the last 2 years. So really, if someone tweets me, I might get back to them in like 2027 or something. Do you know what I mean? But and I'm on Facebook, but it's kind of, you know, I'm not really the...
You're hiding.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk to anyone, and you know, more than happy if anyone wants to catch up and talk about any of this stuff. Then I love meeting new people, and always happy to share. Like, I massively appreciate the people who've given me time over the last few years. That, I mean, that's a big part of this journey, right? Is someone giving you time that can help. So yeah, I'm happy to hear from anyone. You want me to verbalize my email?
Yeah, go for it, and then I'll post it in the comments as well.
So my email is Matt, which is, I'll give my personal ones, Matt, M-A-T-T, at Matthew, which is M-A-T-T-H-E-W, dash Rickard, which is RICKARD.com.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I got that. Matt at Matthew-Rickard.com, and I'll post that in the comments as well for those of you watching. And you heard him. He's happy to connect. So feel free to reach out if you just want to chat. And just before we close up, so for those of you who are watching, thanks for joining, Matt. Thanks again so much for being here. And hopefully those of you who've joined us live have been inspired, draw some really valuable nuggets of wisdom and lessons from Matt tonight. And if you are ready to, you know, start working on your own sort of bold career moves forward, wherever that may be, whatever direction you might be thinking about, we have just released our self-paced version of our Bold Career Move course. So if you guys have been following us for a while, you know that we have been running it live, and we will continue to do that down the line. However, we also know that for a lot of you, when you're ready to make a move, you're just ready like right now, and we didn't want to hinder that momentum. So now we have a self-paced version. I've posted the link. You can have a look, but just in case, it's bit.ly/BCM Lite. So check that out or hit us up if you have any questions. So that's it, guys. I hope everybody has a great week ahead. Matt, big hugs.
Thank you. And go on, England. The big weekend.
Go England! Oh, yes, you'll be in Singapore for the match. So
I will be, yeah. So hopefully I'll see you. I'll be watching it in the middle of the night and be very tired for meetings the next day. But yeah.
I'll come harass you anyway.
Cool.
All right. Thanks so much, Matt. And thanks, everyone who's tuned in. Have a great week. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.